Hello and welcome to the garden at Ballon Temple. I'm going to say a few comments on Corona, capitalism, life and death. Reality bites. Although some people are swarming to the park or getting ready to queue outside McDonald's for their Big Mac, there's still a pandemic. The characteristics of COVID-19 are sobering and should be kept in mind when choosing whether to resume normal behaviour or not. What are the characteristics of COVID-19? The background is that it's related to the common cold, which doesn't have a cure. It was nurtured in an overpopulated, overpolluted world in which genetic engineering was not successfully contained in laboratories. Sensible rules of thumb are that it's 100% infectious, 100% contagious, everyone can catch it. It's got a 1% morbidity, means 1% of the people who get it will die. It's asymptomatic, which means symptoms aren't always displayed when you've got it. So you can't tell if everybody's got it, you can't tell everybody who has it. And it appears that the symptoms are even variable. And that's suggesting that it might be automutagenic, or it can adapt to different environments, which will make it pretty difficult to wipe out. It's definitely going to be here for a long time. It might be here forever. So what happened? Well, complacency and hubris allowed it to become a pandemic. It allowed it to contaminate the world. Everyone knew the pandemic risk was high in January when the unknown symptoms were recognized, and by February it was clear that it had spread to Europe and America and it was fatal. But we were permissive and thought we were immune, despite numerous statements from scientists and doctors that it was a violent killer. We didn't do much, did we? Yes, it's here to stay. And when the lockdown lifts, don't allow complacency to get the better of you. You've heard what we said earlier. It's 100% infectious, 1% morbidity, asymptomatic, variable symptoms. The Spanish flu of 1918 reshaped the world. 50 million people died. The second wave was about 4 or 5 times worse than the first. And the third wave was also worse than the first. Not as bad as the second, but within a year, many people were dead. So let's look at this system that nurtures the confidence so well that it yields complacency, hubris, arrogance. It's called capitalism. Now, before you money men get all sensitive, remember, I'm one of you. I'm a capitalist, a venture capitalist even. Trained at the best business schools in the world, IMD and Wharton, Trump's alma mater. I've practiced as a financial engineer, an investment analyst, a business manager for over 30 years. So I have a fair idea of what's going on, even though I do sing a different song to my other capitalist friends. So what's capitalism about? It's about ownership and control of stuff. And even of not stuff, like ideas. Yes, owning ideas. Control is the important bit. If ownership was about responsibility, things will be different. And we can talk about that at another time. But ownership is about control, not about responsibility. The desire to control is natural, but primitive. It's a natural survival instinct to solve the challenge of understanding the world around us and fitting in. Humans are creative problem solvers, and we want to optimize our situation. At the very basic level, this means we must control our immediate environment, so we compete to get control of things around us. We've extended that, so now we try and get control of things which are further afield and are not around us, but further away. That competitive urge has been nurtured despite the abundance of resources which could allow for all people and nature to thrive. Instead, resources are wasted through a destructive system of competitive resource allocation. The result is pain, hunger, depression for billions of people, billions of humans, and the eradication of lots of other life. Capitalism is the offspring of slavery and feudalism. It is a competitive pyramid representing a hierarchy of control. It destroys resources because the losers are trashed, even when they're excellent. often in fact better than the winners for the group as a whole. A good example is women. In slavery, feudalism and capitalism, women have been sidelined by brute force, and all their talent, intelligence, love, patience that nurtures life in all humanity, our mothers, is debased and neglected. What a waste. And of course the US is a sad, depressing illustration of a society competing itself to death. And I grew up loving America, and I'm part American, and my forefathers started America. So it really hurts to see what has gone on there in my life. Healthcare is not social, it's about money. If you can't pay, you die. Education is about money, not knowledge and learning. America is overcompeting itself to death. Sadly, this approach, so well refined and nurtured by a neoliberal wave since Reagan and friends in the early 80s, people like me have pushed for this and pushed life out of the equation. Capitalism is so efficient that there's no stock in the pipeline. Just-in-time inventory management has pushed stock off the balance sheet. That has made a marginal improvement in profit, but eliminated the ability to operate if there's a glitch in the supply chain. Performance metrics ignore the balance sheet, especially debt and quality, especially with regard to people and the quality of life. You don't hear about it. You hear about GDP growth, but you don't hear about the debt that's been taken on to get those numbers. And you don't hear about the people that are suffering in undignified lives to make that happen. So, when we all decide not to kill ourselves by social distancing and staying at home, the system collapses. There's no food in the warehouse, there's no raw material in the factory, and there are too few ventilators in the hospital. When everything stops for a couple of months or more, it's obvious that the results are going to change from positive to negative. But that hasn't been in the news much. Finally, governments are beginning to own up. Last week, Germany said their economy will shrink 7%. The UK said their economy will shrink 14%. The fact of a global recession has been suggested. The reality is far worse. The debts now building are unrecoverable. Even before Corona, the pension cliff was unfundable. US states alone have an unfunded liability, an unfunded pension liability estimated at over $6 trillion. The energy gap will never be filled. There is no replacement for fossil fuels. Watch Planet of the Humans if you disagree. And biodiversity can't be re-evolved or reinvented in the laboratory. Those species are dead. And as for government finances, well, maybe not very important in reality, but there's a big red mark right across all of those. Luckily, we're not panicking. That would be a waste of energy and it would fail. Calmness has been helped by limited information flows, so few people realize how bad the situation is, and by doling out cash, also therefore building huge debts. Jobs have been kept on, even though they don't exist, by furloughing. That's beginning to end. It's clear that many industries have been decimated and will shrink massively. Obviously, travel, hospitality and tourism, the airline industries, energy industry is under pressure. Food supply. There are still stockouts in the supermarkets locally. 4 major chains in Ireland, international chains, they have stockouts of basic products: flour, bread, eggs. So, and the services which used to require us to go to the office in the city and travel 3 times a week across the border in an aeroplane, well, those all of a sudden we're doing it from home. Unfortunately, there's no vision for how to change the system to recover and rebuild. No vision for how social and economic systems might evolve. So let's look at life and see if it can offer some ideas. I'm going to start at the end of life because it's something that's on everybody's mind, and it's happening to the economic system all over the world. Let's look at death. Now, death is, of course, a part of life, and that's why I'm standing in the garden. On this side, we have the vegetables growing. You can't see it? Well, let me show you. On that side, you have the compost heap. Maybe you can see it. There she is, as I was saying. It's a cycle of life. We have death occurring over here in the compost heap, and we have regrowth occurring over here in the vegetable patch. So, last year's rot is making this year's fruit. We fear death because it's misunderstood. To fear death as a wild creature or an infant, that's normal. It's a survival instinct. Fearing death helps us get through the early years or the unknown environment in which we exist. But we are not trying to survive, are we? We can thrive in this abundant world. And once we mature past the infantile notions of survival, safety and security, we become human. And the qualities that make us human, like strategic thinking, collaboration and altruism, can be nurtured too, so that we live life instead of fearing life and death. Death is a part of life and how we start again. We live on through the next generation. We live on through our children. My children are my legacy. And usually getting out of their way allows them to prosper more vigorously. Hanging on suffocates them and the future. This sanguine view of death helps balance high levels of empathy and altruism, which are innate human qualities. It is these qualities of empathy and altruism which, if nurtured, liberate human potential and make life wonderful. So let's use this event, this pandemic, the dying of the global economy and capitalism, to reinvent the way we do things and choose a better future. Let's see if we can change the way we think about the world. Recognizing that death is a part of life illustrates the connected, circular nature of life. What are the other characteristics of life that might inform our view? What is life all about? Humans, with our problem-solving and urge and creativity, have been trying to ask and answer that question since before we were human. Our problem-solving is made possible by our mind's ability to remember patterns in space and time and conjure up rationales for why these patterns occur. A great insight to this is offered by Neil Gaiman's brilliant poem, The Mushroom Hunters. Mushroom hunters must learn by recognizing patterns made by trial and error, i.e. tasting or eating the mushrooms, and they find out what is food and what is poison. A scientific endeavor. So, some of the universal behaviors we might observe might seem novel, even though they are very basic. Life, or existence, is accidental. There's no reason to indicate a purpose of the universe. It simply is. If any purpose of the universe, surely it is simply to be. The universe is binary. Life is binary, on and off. First there wasn't the universe, then there was a universe. The beginning of the universe was very simple, and it gradually became more complex. Okay? The universe is composed of energy, matter, space and time. Okay? And there are two dualities. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light. Everything is connected. All is one. It's all integrated. Existence is holonic. The physical and metaphysical is all one. They're all connected to each other and to themselves in one universal organism, the universe. And change is its fundamental characteristic. Okay? The universe changes all the time. And the path of change appears to be entropy. That is, it's increasingly complex. It started off as a 0 and then a 1, and then a 0 and a 1, and then a rock, and then a different kind of rock, and then lots more rocks and elements and planets, and we get an Earth, and then eventually we get a bacterium, and then we get a monkey, and then we get a person. Increasing complexity. The increasing complexity on Earth has been characterized by the emergence of consciousness. In hominids, Consciousness is emerging fundamentally more complex. It is more than simple interaction with the environment. It shows up as self-awareness in the environment. This is metacognition. We can see ourselves and know that we're looking at ourselves. We can step away from ourselves and imagine what we are. That's also revealed in the capacity for imagination, even imagining things that don't exist. Another emergent characteristic of consciousness is altruism. The drive of an individual to self-sacrifice for the benefit of the whole community. This is very powerful and clearly far more developed in human than in other animals. Altruism is a foundation of morality. It is a higher intelligence allowing the observer to process patterns of information without a reference to the ego desires of the observer. The observer can step out from their own needs to see what's going on. It's the application of a universal moral values to patterns of information during the process of choosing. So, consciousness is emerging. Once it wasn't there, now it is. And it's getting more sophisticated, more complex. The emergence of intelligence has this pattern of increasing complexity, starting with rocks. Rock ignorance was followed by basic awareness. This was followed by superstition or hypothesizing causes for natural phenomena. Superstition became solidified into practices which became faith and religions. But this representation of truth was inflexible, and so, as observation revealed new information which didn't fit the previous pattern or worldview or superstition, people challenged the accepted wisdom, the accepted superstition, ritual, or religion. That behavior of challenging the status quo reflects higher thinking capacity for self-criticism. That's science. Scientific method is about challenging hypotheses and once agreeing them, continuing to challenge them in case you made a mistake. So, I love the saying, religion offers answers that you may not question. Science or philosophy, the search for truth, offers questions that might never be answered. Science is about critical thinking. And science is quite new to human society, having only been able to crack the walls of feudal power in the past few centuries. Scientific method shouldn't respect the control of information or money. Instead, it respects natural law. Today, 84% of people generally retain a worldview based on superstitions and faith rather than science and knowledge. But this is a start. Not long ago, it was no people, zero. So we do have knowledge and understanding and morality. They are higher level ideas, and there is a way forward. Will we choose it? I don't know. Think about the difference in how the choices regarding the pandemic have been made. Those whose worldview rests on faith have responded to the pandemic with recommendations such as, it'll be gone by Easter, we can develop herd immunity, drink disinfectant to kill the germs, and generally they blame other people for the mistakes. They do not take the blame at all. That's, up to 84% of us, maybe. Hopefully a lot less, but that's that thinking. And then there are those whose worldview leans on science, and they've responded to the pandemic with recommendations such as wash your hands, be careful and socially distance or even isolate, live healthily. And these scientists are at least trying to discover solutions. Now that's 16% of us, or hopefully more. So there are ways forward which are more balanced and natural than the command and control approach of the capitalist autocrat, king or deity. Will we choose them? Will we choose an enlightened, more collaborative, more natural-based future? I don't know. The first step is awareness. Then think and choose the path that suits your purpose. What's the purpose of life? Well, like the universe, like existence itself, is the purpose not simply to be? Thank you.